shirts to give away over the course of this weekend, so make sure you stick with us, and then we'll make our way to the finals for a full year giveaway and another Twitch t-shirt. So, let's see what we're going to crown here. I mean, we got 2 mono blue devotion decks, and then we have other decks.
Yes.
So depending on what side you're on, if you're a devotion fan or non-devotion fan, we'll see what happens here. As a Sacred Foundry to begin here for Robb. It looks like both players have kept, looks like 7. Island here for Greg, and no turn 1 play. So no curve out for him this game.
And you can see that there's a Miknus in Robb's hand, which is very important to overpower and out-tempo this blue deck. He is going to have a big Miknus turn at some point.
Burning Tree Emissary is going to get locked down by Tidebinder Mage and pass the turn back. So no attacks really here for 2. Tidebinder Mage, you can see, as Boros Reckoner comes into play, just how great it is against a red deck. Won't be able to attack now, but I guess if Hatch does have another Tidebinder Mage, and, you know, one of the benefits for him is that he gets to keep hands that are very Tidebinder Mage heavy, as you see that happen right now, because he knows the matchup. So another Tidebinder Mage shows up, takes down the Boros Reckoner, and the first Tidebinder Mage gets in, putting Robb down to 18.
But this Miknus can facilitate a lot of powerful things, potentially Stormbreath Dragon, and more importantly, potentially an overloaded Mizzium Mortars.
And you're going to see a Stormbreath Dragon come into play here, and there is still a white mana available for the Chain of the Rocks that is in Robb's hand. I think he's also hanging out with a Boros Reckoner there too, so Stormbreath Dragon's going to come across here. There is Chain of the Rocks, so that's going to unlock something. So Reckoner is going to come back to play. So now all of a sudden, as you mentioned, the explosiveness of this deck, Robb is right back in this game, even though Greg had a fantastic start. And now you've got even the potential for Stormbreath Dragon to go monstrous next turn.
Yeah, it is very important, like I said, for this red deck to have Miknus early in the game. This is the way it can overpower the blue deck. It's got a very explosive openings.
And you have to imagine that, you know, Greg kept a hand that was pretty good in this matchup. Kept a hand of 2 Tidebinder Mages, maybe a Master of Waves is hanging out in his hand as well. But, you know, right now, even though his start was really good, it looks like Hatch is, you know, behind now.
Oh, by a lot. I don't even know, you know, if Hatch's play this turn is simply Tidebinder Mage. Master of Waves. Even that's not going to really be enough to keep up in this game.
So you do see Mr. Hatch in the tank here, trying to figure out what he can do to get himself out of this situation. It's probably going to have to involve something like Cyclonic Rift, maybe Rapid Hybridization. He's tapping a single blue, so this could represent a Judge's Familiar or a Cloudfin Raptor here, but he's got to get creative and come up with something now. See a Cyclonic Rift there in the grip, so that's a pretty good start. Now, of course, Cyclonic Rift has a nice interaction with Stormbreath Dragon. You can cast that in response to the Monstrosity activation. That won't resolve, and a little bit of nice blowout there. You know, he's going to have to maybe set some sort of trap to make that happen, Will Hatch.
Yeah, but without any pressure, you can't really, he can only fend this off for so long.
You see Greg is doing quite a bit of math here, trying to figure out what he can do.
He could assemble the Rapid Hybridization Cyclonic Rift combo.
This is true. This is true. So there's a Cloudfin Raptor. He's just going to pass the turn back here. So there is some reactive elements in Greg's hand, I believe. As I think Robb drew another Miknus for the turn. So his hand right now is Miknus, Mountain, and Boros Reckoner. But he certainly has something to do with all that mana, as we do see the Stormbreath Dragon in play that has not been monstrous just yet. So Robb is, you know, for lack of a better term, kind of all in here on this dragon.
Yep.
So, certainly plenty of live draws available to him. So he's going to add a bunch of mana to his mana pool. This is for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Minus 3 is 4. And he has not played a land yet, which is important. Going to replay a Miknus. So 4 mana floating. Going to activate Miknus. And he says, how about this Stormbreath Dragon? I think now is as good as time as any to blow that Cyclonic Rift. I would think. You know, in a perfect world, Greg is able to pick up everything.
But we're so far away from that.
Yeah, we are pretty far away from that part of the game. So you see the devotion count here.
And even though it's in the abstract really attractive to be using something like Cyclonic Rift here on the dragon, and Greg might have to, it's still really hard for him to get a foothold in the game. The dragon just comes back next turn. So Hatch actually may be loath to use his reactive cards right now, just because it doesn't actually put him on a path towards doing anything proactive himself.
Yeah. One of the things too, with most bounce spells in Magic, and you can think of all of the ones that have been printed over the years, you're able to bounce your own creature, but Rift, you can't do that. So, if he wants to bounce his Tidebinder Mage and then reset and lock down a Stormbreath Dragon, that's not an option. So, what's the best way to use a Cyclonic Rift in this situation is really difficult to say.
Yeah. He can just bounce the dragon. He can also bounce the Chain of the Rock, get his Tidebinder Mage back, trigger that comes into battlefield, trigger again.
Yeah.
But Robb still has a white mana available, so that doesn't get him very far this turn.
Hatch says, all right, that is fine. Stormbreath Dragon's Monstrosity trigger will resolve. Hatch has 3 cards in his hand, 3 or 4, so he ends up taking some damage. Now Reckoner and Dragon are coming into the red zone as this is just an attack that nothing really goes wrong on. So looks like he says, all right, you're not allowed to attack just yet. So this looks like this might be a Cyclonic Rift on a Chain to the Rocks, perhaps?
And Hatch's hand doesn't have very much action in it. He still has 2 islands left over of his card, so
He's in some trouble here.
way behind on the board and light on action.
All right, so here's an attack. Looks like an easy chump block here. I use the term easy lightly. Yep, so Cloud Tormentor is going to go underneath. Boros Reckoner is going to deal 3. And now we've got a Cyclonic Rift. That's going to bounce Chain to the Rocks momentarily. So Tidebinder Mage is going to come in and lock down something, and we'll get confirmation on what that Tidebinder Mage is locking down now. Now here's 4 mana. And this is a Master of Waves. Okay, so it did lock down the Stormbreath Dragon, and now Master of Waves is going to put a ton of elementals into play. And I guess what this is going to do is going to give Robb the option of what do you want to lock down? With the Chain of the Rocks, do you want to take out my Master? Do you want to take out that Tidebinder Mage that's locking down your Dragon?
Yeah, I think Robb is probably happier to get rid of the Master here. He still has 2 Reckoners in play to pressure Greg, who's fallen to 9, and there's Perforos too.
Yeah, which is a huge draw. And again, going back to how explosive this deck can be, this is a great example of it because now Porphyros gets to start running wild, and that's another thing that Greg has to worry about. It's almost like every threat individually, something needs to be taken care of. Chain of the Rock's going to come in. Master's going to bite the dust. You see with the Nykthos activation, you get 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 red mana. 10 minus 4 is 6, and then 2 activations of Perforos would be available as well.
So that's just lethal.
I believe so. And Greg is going to pick up his islands and everything else. So Robb Miknus is going to win game number 1 here this morning with Red White Devotion over Greg Hatch playing Mono Blue Devotion. As we're going to bring it back here to the booth. Because I got to ask you guys a question very quickly here. If you've never played our premium giveaway, very simply, get your Twitters ready because I'm going to ask you guys a question. You're going to get your Twitter ready, and hashtag the answer of with the hashtag of SCG Premium. We'll be giving away 6 months of premium and a Twitch T-shirt. If you guys weren't here yesterday, Ben Schwartz, who does play Magic and does commentate, works at Twitch, and so he pulled some strings, as it were, and got us a bunch of sweet Twitch T-shirts that we've been giving away all weekend long. So along with our premium giveaway, we'll be giving one of these away with you guys too. So the question this morning from Robb Miknus's deck, he has a lot of 4-ofs, a couple 2-ofs in Porphyros, a couple 3-ofs in his spells, 3 Missing Mortars, 3 Chain of the Rocks, but his deck has just a single 1-of, and it is a Planeswalker. And if you're able to name that single 1-of in Robb Miknus's Red White Devotion deck, tweet your answer with the hashtag of SCG Premium. And again, we will announce the winner at the conclusion of our semifinals. So it is about accuracy, not speed this morning. We're giving away 6 months of premium and that Twitch T-shirt.
On the short list of most underplayed cards in Standard.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. This one, eventually this thing is going to start to dominate. We don't know when, but eventually it will. As we're going to move on to our sideboards here, let's just start with Greg, because he is the one who's behind the 8 ball.
Well, if that game was any indicator, the games where Greg is going to struggle in my mind are the ones that involve explosive Nykthos draws. So I don't think that he can really go to the Planeswalker plan that you typically see Mono Blue Devotion decks go to against removals, matchups where there's removal on the board. I think he's better off bringing in the 2 copies of Rapid Hybridization potentially the Dissolve, and potentially the Domestications to fight against Robb's smaller creatures. Um, but I think the games where Robb has an advantage are in the short Nykthos games. So cards like Jace Architect of Thought and Jace Memory Adept, I don't really think are appropriate for these games.
I would agree with you overall. I mean, what it feels like to me is he doesn't really have a ton of cards to board in here. Now, when we watched Hatch yesterday playing for top 8, he ended up defeating a red-white devotion deck. We had cut in it right at the beginning of game 3. The red-white devotion player had a pretty awkward draw with Ashel, Burn Trim Series, and Anger of the Gods. His draw just did not line up appropriately. We did see Hatch cast a couple domestications that game, which were useful enough. But I don't think he boarded in the Planeswalkers, and I'm kind of agreeing with you in which they don't really do a ton. As far as on Robb's side, you guys do see the sideboard there of 2 Assemble the Legion, 1 Chain of the Rocks, 4 Boros Charms, 3 copies of War Leader's Helix, 2 Wear and Tear, and 3 copies of Anger of the Gods. Anger of the Gods is interesting because it's good against some cards in your deck, and then but it's also good against yourself.
Yes.
So, how many of these do you actually want to board in? I actually I like War Leader's Helix on a power level. And when you do have a ton of mana, things do get really explosive. For sure, if I'm Rob, I want the additional Chain to the Rocks, as we saw how good it was that game. But it's kind of interesting because, I think you can make an argument for some of the cards to board in here, but it's also kind of tough because your deck is kind of like a combo deck, so what do you actually want to board out?
Right. When you have Nykthos and your deck is built around it, there's only so much of the setup cards, the Ash Zealots and the Burning Tree Emissaries and so forth, that you can remove before you take away a lot of the explosiveness of the deck.
Yeah.
It's, you see this a lot in Modern with Affinity, for example, where you can't take out all the Ornithopters and stuff like that in every matchup, even when they're not that good, because you need this density of cheap artifacts to facilitate your powerful stuff. This Red Devotion deck has a similar thing going on with Nykthos, where it can't get rid of that much stuff without impeding on its explosive Nykthos draws. So the 1 Chain of the Rocks, I think, for sure comes in. And if I was in his seat, I would probably leave the other 14 on the sideline.
Fair enough. Just want to keep the general whole together.
Yeah, I think it's possible that Assemble the Legion is better than Hammer of Perforos.
Okay.
They are somewhat similar cards, but Assemble the Legion is just a little more powerful. It's hard to play Hammer of Perforos against a deck with so many good blockers and bounce spells, but that's a sideways upgrade, if anything.
Sure. So both players shuffling up for game number 2 here this morning. If you guys are just joining us, we do appreciate it. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, Star City Games Open Series here in Oakland, California. We're in the semifinals of our Standard Open. We made it through 10 rounds of Swiss, plus our first elimination round yesterday. Today we'll be doing, of course, our semifinals, doing our finals, crowning a champion, a winner's interview in the sideboard with Glenn Jones. Then we'll take a short break and come back for some legacy action. I know we're going to have some great legacy players in attendance. Among them, I know we saw David Ochoa last night.
The Ocho.
The Ocho will be doing battle. So I'm excited to watch him play, as we've never actually covered one of his matches at Star City Game Open. I know that Ben Seck will be here, Ben Lundquist, a whole list of characters. And, of course, we've got Joe Lissette, who's playing in the semifinals right now. And when we do get an update on his match, we'll certainly let you guys know. But he'll be battling with Terminus and friends.
For sure. And a Drew Levin cameo, too, correct?
Thank you. I forgot about that. Drew Levin will be also flying out here.
Yeah.
I think Drew is currently living in Virginia again. And I think this is one of the last legacy tournaments he gets to play in. I think he's starting a new job soon. So he said, hey, I don't get to play for a while. I might as well fly out, play a little legacy action. I think he's still looking for a few cards for his Charlotte's Bug deck.
Yeah, it was really funny on the heels of him writing this is an introductory article to help you, build your first couple legacy decks and building on a budget. He was bad signaling Twitter yesterday for $1,200 worth of cards.
Does anyone have foil force wheels? I need them for my deck. All right, so you see both players taking a look here again. Hatch is going to be on the play as he did get handled pretty good there in game 1. Again, even though he did have what felt like a really good start and a reasonable keep. He had his anti-red cards and Tidebinder Mages and Master of Waves, but the explosiveness of Red-White Devotion, again, there are games where this deck kind of fumbles and stumbles, and then there are games where this deck is absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, Greg is absolutely at the mercy of Robb's best draws. There's not a lot he can do about them, and they're very challenging to beat, as we saw in that first game.
Yeah, it's almost like both players are kind of goldfishing. here because, Greg has very little interaction, as most people are familiar with Mono Blue by now. There aren't really counterspells in this deck hanging out. If they are, they're kind of in the sideboard, but they're, we're not in the days of Mana Leak and all that stuff. You can't really break up what they're doing. Your interaction is Cyclonic Rift and Rapid Hybridization and maybe a Domestication here or there, and that's about it.
Yeah, it interacts by blocking. That's its form of interaction. And the red-white Devotion deck's best draws are impossible to block.
Yeah.
And we didn't even see Mizium Mortars that game, too. That could have been overloaded so early in that game.
Yeah, with the greatest of ease. And that is a 3 of in Robb's deck. The fourth one, not throughout the 75. The lists do vary between how many Mizium Mortars they play, but an integral part to what's going on there. So, Robb, kind of mulligan here. That's one thing this deck does a decent amount too, the red-white Devotion deck, because again, it is kind of like our combo deck in Standard. You see Temple of Triumph going to get the show started here for Miknus, going to keep the top card. It is basically a combo deck. It's looking for a certain combination of cards. This Hatch is going to play a Mutavault. He started off with a Cloudfin Raptor. Now here's an Ash Zealot for Robb. Getting cards for 2. Going to put Hatch down to 18. So let's see if Hatch is maybe looking for a third land. It looks like he did draw an island, so is maybe a Thassa game? It is. All right, so the God of the Sea has shown up while Robb is taking a draw step here. Mizium Mortars off the top. That's certainly something that's going to be important. It looks like he's got a lot of Boros Reckoners in his hand, too.
But these are the kind of games that Greg can win when the red-white Devotion deck basically plays like an inefficient mono-red beatdown deck.
Mm-hmm.
That's a game plan the mono-blue deck can definitely handle. It's the nick those draws that are very challenging.
Definitely agree with you on that one. Scry's going to put the card to the bottom. Hatch going to take a draw step, draws an island. So that's going to come into play. This feels like a Night Veil Spectre, maybe a Master of Waves, maybe a Domestication. This is Domestication. As we do have a quick update for you guys in our other match. While Greg is taking over a Boros Reckoner, Joe Lissette is taking down game number 1 over Emin Hatamian. So Lissette with blue-white control up a game over mono-blue Devotion. I think we'll probably have some time to make it to that game. But in the meantime, Chain of the Rocks takes down that Boros Reckoner. Another one shows up to the party, and Ashtel gets in for a couple more points of damage.
And if Boros Reckoner is really good against mono-red, then certainly control magic on your own Boros Reckoner is even better.
Yeah, a great plan. That Cloudfin Raptor.
Still just hanging out.
Yeah, just boring old 0-1. He needs some help.
He'll get his time to shine.
Yeah, hopefully soon enough. Hatch is going to resolve the scry here on Thassa. He's got some decisions to make. Another Domestication would be great here. You saw Robb's hand again. He does have Mizium Mortars. I think he has a third Boros Reckoner as well. And as you mentioned, right now Robb is playing as an inefficient mono red deck.
Yep.
He's not doing anything he's supposed to, like we saw in game number 1. And this is exactly how Greg wants the games to go from his side. He just needs to start actually cobbling together something of relevance here. The Domestication was a great start, but that got handled. But then again, a Chain of the Rocks on Robb's creature is great because now it opens up the door for your Master of Waves and your Thassa as well, not to die.
Yeah, as long as, you're not exposing yourself to any disaster like overloaded mortars or Storm Breath Dragon, it's really hard for the red Devotion deck to just kind of go pound for pound with the tempo and card advantage of the blue Devotion deck.
Now Jace, Architect of Thought, is going to show up to the party, so we'll see how he's going to use this Planeswalker. And he's going to tick it up. So right now the attack for Robb on his turn would be for 3 points of damage, depending on how he wants to attack and where he wants to go. Fanatic of Mogi, a big draw here for Robb, so a lot of damage could be headed towards Jace here in the near future. Don't forget about that Boros Reckoner and Mizium Mortars there in Robb's hand. We'll figure out where the attacks are going here.
I'm assuming that if he didn't play the Fanatic before combat, that these attacks are going at Greg.
Okay. Yep, they are going at Greg. So it looks like Fnatic is on killing Jace duty this game.
Or perhaps killing Greg.
Yeah, that's true. He may not care about Jace at all.
I mean, he has another Boros Reckoner in his hand. It's going to be a lot of damage.
Yep, and there is that Boros Reckoner that you did mention. So Hatch goes down to 11, and Fnatic right now would be for 3, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Which is a lot.
Yeah.
9's a lot.
That is not a small amount.
That's not a small amount.
For some reason, I have a feeling Jace is going to be going downtown.
Yeah.
This turn, I think Greg needs some sort of action.
Well, he does have Master of Waves in hand.
Okay.
I believe, at least from earlier draw steps. So,
That'll turn on Thassa as well.
yep. But it's rough. He really can't start attacking into these Boros Reckoners until he's willing to use mana to do things like make Thassa unblockable. So he's still kind of a little ways away from being able to attack.
You see an island there, Cyclonic Rift in Hatch's hand as well. So what is the mono blue player going to do? He has to be very cognizant of the fact that Fnatic and Mogus can kill him out of nowhere, at least get him low enough so the Reckoners do come to the red zone. They are actually just lethal attackers if you don't block them.
Yes. And the Reckoners are one of the few rare red creatures that you can't lock up with Master of Waves on defense also. So, like you said, Greg has to be very conscious of his life total.
All right, he's tapping some manas. Maybe a Tidebinder Mage here to start? A real tough spot here. Alright, so it is Tidebinder Mage. Welcome to the party.
I would assume on the untapped Reckoner.
Yeah, I would like to think so. Yep. He's going to evolve that Cloud from the Raptor, so that's going to become a 1-2 finally.
It's all grown up.
Yeah.
Only took 5 turns, but
Island comes into play as well. Again, don't forget that Hatch does have a Cyclonic Rift in his hand. And now Thassa feeling's tough. I guess Hatch's thought process here is, I got to deal some amount of damage here.
Yep. And remember, he still has Cyclonic Rift in hand to protect himself as well.
He has Cyclonic Rift and has not used Jace yet. So that's important. Jace is going to go up, going to pass that turn back. So Robb quickly untaps. He takes a draw step. It's a Burning Emissary. That is a healthy draw. That's what that is. Yep. So here's Emissary, and you know he's gonna slam down Fnatic because it's a lethal one. And luckily for Greg, he does have that Cyclonic Rift in his hand. I think he wants to bounce the untapped Reckoner.
Yeah, I think that Rob might have gotten a little ahead of himself here.
Agreed.
He might have wanted to go into combat first and attack with that Reckoner.
Mm-hmm. And I'm almost positive it has to be Reckoner, right? Because now Fnatic will deal 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll put Hatch at 3. And Hatch really has to pick up the pace here.
Although this is actually a really big tempo swing. I mean, none of Rob's creatures are that threatening outside of the Reckoners.
Mm-hmm.
So this turn, Greg gets to make a fairly large attack, most likely, with his Thassa and possibly others. And then Robb has to spend a turn recasting the Reckoner, and Greg can still be attacking. He can be using Thassa and Jace to look for a rapid hybridization, possibly another Cyclonic Rift. So
If you're Greg, I feel like one of Greg's best draws in this situation right now, outside of rapid hybridization, which is a card that you mentioned, is Nykthos.
Mm-hmm.
And they can allow him to actually force through damage with Thassa, make it unblockable, leave enough guys back on defense, all of that stuff to be able to try to steal a win here. But he's really got to get the ball rolling, as you mentioned. And really interesting, well, another thing that's going to be really interesting, is how he decides to use Jace. And he is going to go down here, so I need help. That's what he's saying. 1, 2, and 3. What do we reveal? Architect of Thought, Master of Waves, Tidebinder Mage, and a Mutavault.
pretty juicy Jace right
Yeah.
there.
And the other thing, too, that's really interesting about this is that Hatch has not played a land yet this turn. So there are some huge decisions to be made. And from what we remember, Hatch has a Master in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
So if Hatch ends up taking the Tidebinder Mage and the Mutavault here, he can go, attack with Thassa in some nature, put you down to 10, play Tidebinder Mage, tap something, play Master of Waves, and then may be able to actually kill Robb on the follow-up turn before Boros Reckoner and Missing Mortars actually do anything. Of course, we don't know what the top card of Robb's deck is, but this is that was a really fast split for Robb, which makes sense because Master of Waves is a very scary card.
I don't think you can give him Master of Waves and mana I think you cannot give him the most expensive spell in a land.
Sure.
You know, on board it means that Greg is able to do something like play Master of Waves and make Thassa unblockable, and that turn is probably just not tolerable for Robb.
Sure. And see, the big thing here, as you see Hatch doing the math, is I think Greg realizes the same thing that we do, is that this needs to be a 2-turn game.
Yeah.
He needs to kill him in 2 turns. This is turn 1. He has to kill him the next turn. And Greg says, I want all 3. What's it going to take to get all 3? That's interesting, because if Greg ends up taking the Tidebinder Mage and the Mutavault, maybe he just goes, all right, take these 2. I have a Master in my hand already, at least we believe that he does, and he gets his 6th land, he makes Thassa unblockable, puts you to 10, play Master. Maybe he attacks with a Cloud from after 2, because it'll evolve up to 2. It'll evolve up to 2, and so that'll make it an attack for 5, 6,
That's
7.
turn.
Yeah. And then the Master of Waves has a protection from red. They can get the Raptor and then Thassa as well, and that'll get the job done. But this our entire plan is predicated on the fact that we believe he has Master Waves in his hand.
Yeah.
Master on the bottom, yeah, not to the graveyard. You see his hand, he's got Rapid Hybrid. Another thing too, I think what's I don't want to say what's taking Greg a long time here, but what he's doing is he's figuring out how long he has and what he can play and not play around. You know, like, can he afford to play around a card like Stormbreath Dragon? Does Robb have one of those in his hand? Because he's been stuck on 4 mana the entire game. And Robb takes this immediately.
That was a really fast no block there.
Yeah.
I think there's a good argument for chump blocking, since every 5 damage is basically a turn that Greg gets to shave off the game.
Yeah, I was actually a little bit surprised to see the chump block, or excuse me, to see him take the damage so quickly, because yeah, I was kind of with you, where I think that's a really great situation for Burning Emissary to just block. So Master Wave is going to come into play. You've got a devotion of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So a ton of elementals are going to come into play, and all of a sudden now Robb has to top deck to get himself out of this one, I think.
Yeah, the lack of the chump block there. I mean, I don't know if he needs to hold. You know, does that extra creature in play mean that if he draws a Nykthos, he gets to play Reckoner and Overload Mortars or something? Maybe there's some argument, but I think that I would have at least strongly debated chump blocking with one of his creatures there.
Now the big question here is, what can Robb draw to get himself out of this situation? I think it may be just a Chain to the Rocks. What does he draw? Jeez.
Fnatic is.
That is going to do it right off the top. A Fanatic of Mogus.
Yep.
That is going to do it. Robb Miknus, with a very nice top deck, defeats Greg Hatch 2 games to 0. Red-White Devotion, moving on to the finals.